You know who else likes... Which one am I even doing? C? Okay. You know who else likes reading scary stories about the deep ocean? My mom! It was 14 years ago. I was deep sea fishing off the edge of the Atlantic continental shelf. Something took my line, fast. I had a tight hold on the rod, and I was right at the edge of the boat. The force was so quick. I was pulled over the side of the boat and down. Deep, deep down. Very, very fast. I went so far down so quickly that it was completely pitch black, extremely cold, and the sound of the boat propeller was drowned out by the immense pressure and distance. My ears popped, but not in the good way. The tympanic membrane in both my ears ruptured. I broke blood vessels in both my eyes, and I felt like my whole body was in a vice. Water rushed into my throat. I'd let go of the rod for at least 10 seconds, though I wasn't sure if I was floating upwards or staying still. I thrashed rapidly, trying to move in any direction. I wasn't sure which was what, but I didn't just want to sit there. Suddenly, something huge hit me from behind. It felt like it pushed me forward 30 or 40 feet. It was so massive. I felt it on the entire back of my body, back of my head, shoulders, thighs, calves, ankles. It was big. It felt like a huge rock. It was really cold, and it was moving fast. I went unconscious shortly after I was hit. What was recounted to me later, apparently my body floated to the surface in a dead float about 5 or 6 minutes after I went under. The physical evidence and damage to my body put that I was dragged very, very deep, very, very fast. Though the massive object hitting me is met with skepticism. They think I was dreaming in my unconscious state. Some people think it was a whale, and some think it could have been a submarine. Real skeptics think I just floated up and was hit forward by the boat. I'm not sure. All I know is I will never go out onto the ocean ever again. B7, alone on beach. Kid comes up to me and asks me to go swimming. Kid is about my age, so I trust him. We swim out a little bit, and we're having a good time. He keeps trying to get me to go into deeper water. It's too deep. I don't go with him. He starts to change. Eyes glow red. Sharp teeth. Nope.jpg. I start to swim back to shore. He follows very fast. I can't breathe. I'm on beach running towards the road. Call for parents. I turned around. Boy is getting bigger. Face is peeling back to reveal insectoid pinchers. Nope. I run as fast as I can until I reach my parents. They tell me I'm imagining things. As we leave, Dad turns on the radio. Radio talks about missing children's bodies being found dismembered and floating in the deep water. Not much of a story, but here it goes. Be diving in the ocean with a friend. We have these neat little diver radios that signal for help and stuff. Sound is kinda muffled. The ocean is quieter than our last trip. We had decided to go into the water late, so we needed extra lighting. Feel really at peace as I hover over an endless blue. I see below into the abyss and laugh at my friend saying, "Don't look down, you might fall." He doesn't answer, and I see him sinking lower into the blackness. I decide to follow and tap him on the shoulder. Radio is fizzling strangely, and he's not turning to face me, just gently and slowly descending. Panic and think he's having a heart attack or something. Signal to the friend on the boat to throw a rope. Radio is still fizzling out. Friend is almost hard to see now, and I say fuck it and wrap my hands around him to pull him up. Radio fizzles in for a second. He keeps telling me to let him go because his family is down there. I think he got the bends or something, but weird because it was a descent. Take my chance and ask for a rope now that the radio is clear. He starts to struggle saying, "No, no." Static. To see them, static, please. Like some kind of heroin addict. Yell at him to calm down. Rope is gliding down from the fading sunbeams. For a brief second, I think I might lose him, but the rope was put right beside us. I wrap it around his arm and he gets pulled up with me. Look down into the pit. I swear I saw a face smiling. Like 2 eyes and pearl white teeth glinting and smiling just below us, and then it faded as though descending deeper. Get pulled out. Never went back to that spot. Took me a month to go back to diving. Friend said he got the bends, but I think something weird was going on. The bloop was an ultra-low frequency underwater sound recorded by NOAA in 1997. It was unlike any other sounds ever recorded underwater due to its frequency and the fact that it was recorded by other sensors thousands of miles from its estimated source. It is consistent with other marine animal noises due to its rapidly changing frequency, but it would be an animal many times larger than the blue whale, the largest animal to ever exist. The consensus by most scientists is that it was caused by geological activity. Oh, that's the black carpet, allegedly. A bit of an urban legend amongst deep-sea divers. I'm that diver anon if anyone was in the last deep-sea thread. I've heard about this thing a couple of times from coworkers and buddies. I don't remember the details of the full story right now, to be honest, but I'll talk to my buddy sometime and see if he remembers and post him on here. But the basic gist that I can remember is that this thing is some sort of colony organism, like a giant moving coral. It's a giant black carpet of macrobiotic cells that crawls over the ocean floor, sifting through nutrients with millions of tiny feelers. Nobody has ever gotten a good estimate of the size other than, it's big, and apparently it makes a noise similar to this bloop thing. One guy apparently saw it swimming and riding the currents as well, so it does more than just crawl on the ocean floor. I suppose you could call it a one-of-a-kind organism, but I'm not sure if that applies to colony organisms like this. So you're saying the ocean floor is covered by a giant jellyfish? Essentially, yes. According to how the black carpet has been described to me, it shares many similarities to a jellyfish. One story I heard had a diver getting stung by some of the large feeler strands that apparently hangs off the top, similar to a jellyfish. There was this really old retired diver I talked to who claimed to have seen it. He claimed to have seen an entire decomposing sperm whale being consumed by the carpet. I should really make a post compiling all the stories I've heard about this thing. So I talked to my buddy and I'm going to start writing up some of the stories I've heard about the black carpet. Bro, he posted this like 10 minutes after his last post. This is the first story I heard of it, from some Finnish bloke with a strong accent. He was doing a deep sea dive repairing some sort of cable. I assume it was probably fiber optic. As he told it, initially he thought he was in the wrong spot because he couldn't find the cable anywhere. He starts searching and eventually finds one end, just the one, sheared clean through. He gets his dive buddy to stay with that end of the line while he goes looking for the other end, swimming in a straight line in the direction of the other line. In his estimation, he swam about a half a mile before he found the other end of the line. He stressed to me that the entire half a mile middle section of the line was just completely gone. It was a huge deal and everyone thought it was the Russians, but this guy was sure that the carpet thing had done it. Said he heard the noise it apparently makes, even though he never saw it. The next story is from my buddy. He heard it from a guy who heard it from a guy who heard it from another guy, so take it with a heavy grain of salt. This guy is doing a dive. Depth, location, and what he was doing never got specified, just that he was really deep. He starts hearing this odd noise that gets associated with the carpet a lot. The way he described was similar to that of the bloop. Ultra low pitch, sort of like a super creepy distorted whale song. As he gets closer, he hears this almost static crackling noise as well. The way he described it, it was like a million prawns getting cracked open at once, if that makes any difference. As he gets closer to the bottom, the noises are getting louder and louder. At this point, he was thinking he's hearing some sort of sonar from a submarine and that some jackass submarine crew is playing a joke on him. When the guy gets to the bottom, he shines his light around, trying to find whatever he's looking for. And what he says was that the seafloor had literally come to life and was crawling past him. This is probably the best description of the carpet you're going to get. According to this guy, carpet is at least a mile long/wide, made mostly of these strange black feelers that apparently make the strange popping noise. Most of the top is covered in various sand, rock, debris, and with feelers poking through. Also, a few long transparent stalks, as he described them, that float upwards. Apparently, some of these were like 20 feet long. According to the guy, it was singing, which doesn't make any sense to me, but whatever. Guy swam back up to the surface and claimed he had an equipment malfunction, came back down a couple hours later and got there just in time to see the last of the thing disappear. Apparently, it stretched as far as the eye can see, which isn't that far at the bottom of the ocean, but still. This one is an old urban legend that's been floating around the diving community for years. Never heard a concrete source of it, so in my opinion, it probably never happened. Especially since it involves a submarine crew, so I'm not sure how a diver would have heard about it, since as far as I know, submarine crews usually stay inside their ship. Anyway, here it goes. Submarine is doing something, either war games or patrolling for Chinese, Russian, North Korean bad guy submarines. The story isn't terribly consistent about this. I hear it different every single time. For whatever reason, they're not using active sonar because they want to avoid detection, floating dead somewhere a couple hundred meters off the sea floor. They're just sitting there, chilling and listening with their sensors, trying to detect enemy submarines or whatever, when they start hearing the noise. Their sensors can't make any sense of it, and it's getting louder at an alarming rate. Starts out as something only the sensors can hear, but before long the entire crew is hearing this strange, distorted humming and singing that people always associate with the carpet. Captain thinks the only explanation is that it's some sort of new sonar or jamming technology, and order the sonar crew to send out a ping to locate the source of the noise. This is the part of the story that stays the most consistent, I assume because it's the most memorable. The sonar operator shouts out, "New sonar contact, bearing... Sir? What's our depth?" The captain replies, 500 meters, or whatever depth the submarine is supposed to be at. The sonar operator replies, "But sir, the sonar says the seafloor is 10 meters below us." The captain says that's nonsense, then walks over to the sonar station, checks the reading, then walks over to the helmsman and checks the depth, checks the nautical charts for where they are. Somehow, apparently, the ocean has gotten about 200 meters shallower. The captain orders another ping from the sonar to try and locate the source of the noise. Sonar operator speaks up again, concerned. "Sir, the ocean is getting deeper again." Captain asks him to repeat himself. "Ocean floor is once again at expected depth, sir." Captain takes a look for himself, and sure enough, they're no longer 10 meters above the seafloor. There's also a very, very large dot on the screen behind the submarine. Captain asks what the large contact is. Sonar operator, "Equipment malfunction, sir." Captain pings again, just out of curiosity. The equipment malfunction has maintained its shape and is continuing to move away from the submarine, and apparently taking the strange noise with it. Again, this is basically an old wives' tale amongst deep-sea divers, so take it with a grain of salt. It's possible that a submarine detected the carpet, or whatever, on sonar, and that's the origin of the story, but I highly doubt that this actually happened. Still makes for a cool story, though. Last story for now. I'll see if I can dig up some more later. This is from the old guy I talked about earlier. Nice guy, marine biologist who has done both deep-sea welds and natural research studies with ROVs. Apparently, the carpet ate one of his ROVs on an expedition. According to him, it happened late one night while the rest of his crew was sleeping. He was pulling an all-nighter studying the sea life around volcanic vents. He's moving the ROV from one vent area to the next when he sees what he described as churning sediments on the seafloor. A giant moving cloud of underwater dust essentially moving towards the ROV. He moves in closer and sees what he describes as a colossal echinoderm crawling along the seafloor with long, dexterous filament probing the seafloor ahead of it. He maneuvers the ROV in for a closer look and uses the arm to prod one of the filaments. In the blink of an eye, he lost contact with the ROV. Apparently it happened so fast he didn't even see it happen. 1 second, the thing was 5 meters away from the vehicle, and the next second it had swallowed the thing whole. His excuse for not having footage was that all the footage was recorded and stored on the ROV rather than being recorded on the operating station, which seems fishy to me. He was, however, very confident in himself, to the extent he claims that he is the discoverer of this new species. He even gave it a name, which I completely forgot because it was so stupid and boring. Giant sea carpet sounds cooler anyway. If it's similar to a jellyfish and is actually a colony of microorganisms, then it might be related to a Portuguese man-of-war. The way I've heard it described, it shares more similarities with starfish or sea anemone than a jellyfish. The marine biologist guy who said he'd seen it had some interesting thoughts on what it was. His idea is that it's some sort of holdover or descendant from the very first invertebrate forms of life on Earth. He did a whole long talk about how coral is one of the oldest forms of life on the planet, and the reason why the ocean is the only place teeming with large invertebrate creatures is because that's where all life first evolved. In his mind, jellyfish and all other sea invertebrates probably evolved from this thing rather than vice versa. This giant sea carpet or whatever would have been one of the very first life forms to ever exist on Earth, technically making it one of our ancient ancestors. It's a pretty cool theory, all things considered. Way back in the mid-1980s, I read in a book on cryptids that there was something called the hide. Apparently it was a flattish thing with eyes along the rim, about the size of a large cowhide, hence the name. From what I recall, the one observation was of such a creature rising up out of an underwater trench to absorb a shark who'd somehow become paralyzed by it. It was observed at some distance by a diver. Does any of that ring a bell to anyone? Supposedly took place somewhere off the Pacific coast of South America. I've heard some people who claim to have seen that thing or similar things. A lot of stuff I've heard from other divers seems like they could be attributed to very rare and large siphonophores that live in the deep sea. What you're talking about was described to me as a sort of pancake-shaped creature that would hide under the sand with a single small, near-transparent tentacle floating upwards. A diver touched it, spasmed, and immediately the creature rose out of the sand to devour him. Don't touch strange shit in the ocean, people. May as well go on a tangent and talk about some other stories I've heard that might be attributed to siphonophores. There was this one cranky old retired diver who swore he'd seen a sea monster of unfathomable size on a dive once. I always assumed he was full of shit, but the way he describes it, it sounds a lot like a siphonophore. The story went something like this. He was on a dive doing something that I've forgotten when he sees an absolutely giant tentacle stretching up from the nearby drop-off. The thing was so huge he couldn't see no beginning nor end to it, and so now he goes around constantly claiming to have come within a hair breadth of devourment by a gargantuan sea leviathan of unfathomable proportion. And yes, this is exactly how he talked. Looking into these siphonophores, it makes total sense that something like this could exist, though it would be less of a sea monster than a giant serpentine jelly blob sifting through plankton and floating nutrients. Another siphonophore-related story I've heard is one about an absolutely gargantuan jellyfish-type creature that was allegedly about the size of a military submarine. The diver who saw it said the thing was so massive it had somehow developed its own biosphere with various species of fish circling around and swimming inside it. He described it as having an appearance like a giant upside-down orchid suspended underneath a massive sphere of translucent jelly. The coloration was very dull, but that might have just been due to the extreme depth. Flat life forms can hide amazingly well. Just a regular skate or flounder is proof enough of that. I found the book myself, and it does mention that the shark made a convulsive spasm as the creature rose up and sucked the shark through some sort of orifice in the center of the creature. The book is Living Wonders, Mysteries and Curiosities of the Animal World by John Mitchell and Robert J.M. Richard. What a name. This story is off on a bit of a tangent, very much out there in terms of believability. It's not a very widespread or widely believed story, mostly because of how crazy and supernatural it is. If you work as a diver for long enough, you're bound to run into a few people like this. Ultra superstitious guys who believe in all sorts of curses, black luck, sea monsters, etc. A common belief you'll find among many of them is this sea deity / god, demon called Davy Jones, who roams the seafloor searching for divers or sailors who have displeased him for one reason or another. Whenever someone or something is lost at sea and never recovered, Davy Jones has got it. What makes this X-related is the description this one guy gave me of this Davy Jones, because it's pretty spooky. The guy claimed to have seen on one of his dives a trail of giant footprints approximately as long in length as he was tall, so about 5.5 feet long since the guy was pretty short. And though he'd never seen it himself, he claimed that one of his friends had. This Davy Jones was a bipedal humanoid that stood over 200 feet tall, on tall, stalk-like limbs that he was walking along the seafloor with, kicking up great clouds of silt behind him as he walked. According to this guy, to look him in the face is instant death, for his visage be too horrifying for any mere human to behold. He was probably just fucking with me, but it's still a pretty cool spooky story to put on here for you lads. So I finally got hold of the old biologist guy on the phone and talked to him about the sea carpet again. According to him, it's not a siphonophore. He qualified that by saying that siphonophores are not fast or mobile. They survive by basically floating around expending very little energy and occasionally snagging a meal with their neurotoxin stinger tentacles. He talked for a while about what makes the carpet seemingly a biological impossibility. According to him, something of that size wouldn't get enough food or energy to survive and keep up its level of activity just from scavenging sediments on the seabed. Say that 5 times fast. Siphonophores can get really, really huge because they sort of sit around and let food come to them without any energy expenditure. So the profile of the carpet fits more with an active predator and scavenger than a passive one. I mentioned to him that I'd heard stories about decomposing corpses of whales being seen by some people being digested by the carpet, and he got really excited about that. His working theory is that the carpet is an entirely unknown form of life, in the sense that it is a colony organism similar to that of a siphonophore, but the individual cells are much more complex and capable than those of a siphonophore, Keep in mind this is purely theoretical stuff he's pulling out of his ass to try and explain why something that should be physically and biologically impossible might exist. He studies siphonophores quite extensively, and one thing that remains a mystery is how the cells communicate, considering they have no central nervous system or brain to speak of. They're basically just big bacteria. The key, apparently, is high-frequency vibrations. He hasn't been able to prove it yet because it's damn hard to get your hands on a siphonophore to study, but he thinks the individual cells vibrate to communicate with one another and pass a message along the entire organism. His theory is that the carpet is basically the siphonophore equivalent of a Russian nesting doll. Rather than being a colony of individual cells, it is a colony of individual multicellular siphonophores and is therefore the missing link between single-celled life and complex multicellular life. The bloop noise which the carpet apparently makes is actually millions of these creatures communicating in their own primitive language. Since siphonophores can reproduce asexually, he envisions the carpet as constantly evolving in size and shape depending on the environment and amount of food it can consume. So, perhaps after consuming the carcass of a very large creature like a whale or a giant squid, it would be extremely large and have a large amount of cells, but would eventually shrink as it self-consumed unneeded cells. The multicellular structure of the carpet serves a twofold purpose, both serving as a distraction from potential predators similar to a lizard losing its tail while running away, and a long-term storage of nutrients. Since big meals are few and far between at the bottom of the ocean, the carpet stores the energy it consumes by creating more cells and growing larger, which it will consume between meals whenever it needs. Not just that, but he's very convinced that the first forms of life on Earth evolved in the deep ocean near volcanic vents, making the carpet the oldest existing form of life on the planet by far. He talked my ear off for a while, but I don't have much more interesting to tell you guys other than this for now. Though I feel that even though this is X and people come here to hear about supernatural and weird stories and shit, this is just the hypothesis of one guy who apparently saw the carpet once. This is by no means the definitive truth, and this guy hasn't actually ever been able to perform a real scientific study on it. He just saw it once and is drawing conclusions from what little knowledge he has. Holy shit, you guys are all a bunch of absolute Yes, the thread is interesting and the carpet thing is an interesting concept, but for you people to actually believe this, you must all be a load of blithering idiots. I used to be a deep-sea crab fisherman. I lived on a 12-man boat for weeks at a time, fishing in the Atlantic, just south of New Zealand. Because we were so far south and we fished mostly during the winters, it was nighttime for almost 18 hours a day, and when it got too cold and too dark, we would have to sit the day out and work indoors. During one of those particularly icy and dark days, I was sitting around with some other guys talking to the oldest guy on the boat. Everyone used to call him Smiles because he was a very bitter guy. I still liked him though. We were making conversation to avoid getting too bored and sea crazy. We started talking about the worst experiences of our lives. Smiles said it was years and years ago when he was about 23. He was out fishing with his father and brother on a little 4-man boat. He told us that a storm rolled in from land, which is very rare, and trapped him out at sea in the downpour and huge waves. Eventually, his boat succumbed to the pounding and started to go down. He completely lost sight of his brother and father and was pushed down into the water by the waves above. He said he was about 20 feet down when he felt his back pressed up against the side of an underwater mountain. Of course, this didn't make any sense because he was fishing over an extremely deep point in the ocean. The south of New Zealand is extremely deep black water. Smiles kept talking, said that he pushed himself off the underwater mountain and towards the surface. When he was swimming back up to the air above, he looked to see this mountain. Smiles made it clear that the water was very, very dark and murky, but he said that even so, he was sure he saw what he did. He told us that when he looked back, he saw that the mountain he had pushed himself off was moving just slightly, and that there were 2 glowing points far deeper in the water that were on either side. Smiles was never one to tell a lie, and he looked me right in the eye when he said that what he saw was alive. What he thought was a mountain was some sort of leviathan. He said it was so huge that his entire field of view was taken up by its face alone. He told us its face was almost all teeth, with red glowing eyes mounted on a face more terrifying than Satan's mother. Smiles said it was so huge that its neck went down into the ocean for at least 1,000 feet. He couldn't even say what the rest of its body must have looked like. Smiles was visibly sweating at this point. Of course, he went on to say that he was absolutely terrified. He said that he was already scared out of his mind to be overboard in a storm, but when he realized that that thing was alive, he was so scared he almost froze. He obviously got back to the capsized boat and managed to get back to the shore alive, though scared out of his mind and half frozen from the water. None of us ever found out if he was telling the truth, but how could we anyway? I had trouble sleeping that night with the knowledge that I was in the same ocean that Smiles spoke about. I've had nightmares about his tale, and I really hope he made it all up. I've heard that we know more about the surface of the moon than the bottom of the ocean, and that leaves a lot of space for freaky as fuck sea creatures. Creepy sea experiences thread? I'll bite. About 13 years ago, I was on vacation in Europe, close to Armenia. I was actually in Azur at the time. It was one of my father's dreams to look at the Caspian Sea during the sunset because the view is meant to be something you'll remember for the rest of your life. I, frankly, just loved to swim and thought it'd be an experience we could share. It was sundown by the time I actually got in the water, and my dad was reclining back on a lawn chair and watching the horizon while I swam out about 30 feet and just sort of laid out on my back and watched the sky. It was one hell of an experience, I'll tell you. The water wasn't exactly shallow at this point. If I had to guess, I'd say it was about 20 feet deep at least, 35 max. As I said, I was just reclining back in the water floating about when I felt something nudge the small of my back near my waist. It was a small bump at first. I thought it was just a little fish or something, but then I felt it again, slightly harder. I still ignored it, but the third time it hit me, it was noticeably hard, harder than any of the small fish could hit me. I had just started to say, "Dat?" when I was hit a fourth time. Except this time, it was incredibly hard. I mean, the impact sent me about 6 to 7 feet into the air before I smashed down into the water face down. I was worried I had broken my back, but everything seemed intact. I could still move my arms and legs, but I was too dazed to do anything besides just float there. While I was face down in the water, just sort of staring into the murkiness, I saw a shadow reflecting off of the water, moving around and under me. Never close enough so I could make out any of the features, but I could make out an outline. It was about 15 feet long and bulky. It had giant eyes that reflected every scrap of sunlight left at that depth, making them glow a pale yellow and blue. It almost looked humanoid, except what I mistook for arms and legs were actually serpentine-like appendages that moved stiffly and were covered with a prickly, sticky substance. It wrapped those 4 appendages around my waist and shoulders and tried to drag me farther down, but my dad was already in the water at this point and grabbing at my arm to pull me up to the surface. The minute he pulled back, the creature let out a low tone, a violent mixture of a squeal and a hiss, and released me. The last thing I saw was it spinning those appendages in unison like a propeller and using them to glide down deeper out of my sight. My dad was freaked the fuck out and said it looked like a bomb went off in the water and he lost sight of me. I had no clue what happened or what that thing was, but holy hell, you never really know what's lurking down in the depths. Be young, like 9 or so. Live only a mile or so from the beach. Hot summer day. Grab older sister and boogie boards. Hit the beach. The way the shore is shaped often gets riptides. Riding boogie board in about 5 feet of water. Overturned by a wave and go ass over tea kettle. Knock into board. Knocks the air out of me. Hit sand at the bottom and get pulled into riptide. Pulled out to sea and I don't know where I am. Convinced I'm going to drown. Finally let out of the current. Boogie board pulls me up. Got pulled quite a ways down the coast. Near an oil refinery. See a weird old man on the rocks staring out into the water. Looks directly at me. Never been so scared in my life. Something about this guy isn't right. Paddle my way to shore as fast as I can. Never go swimming in an ocean again. I love all the random ass details in here. Like oil refinery and the man just looked at you and what? I just wanted to include this story because I liked that he said ass over tea kettle. It's one of my favorite expressions. Shut up. Be 16 to 17. Surfing some gnarly waves. Notice a funny smell. Keep surfing. Whatever. Waiting to catch a wave, I see a swollen purple-looking body just floating on by. I puke as I realize I've been surfing in death water. Paddle back to shore and puke again. Go home and take a long shower. The smell was so fucking bad, I didn't tell anyone on the beach. I just figured it'd wash up ashore and get sorted out. Oh, you suck. Not a diving story, but it's an ocean story. It happened on an island a little offshore of Australia. Nighttime, maybe 10 or 11 p.m. Wintertime, so it's freezing down here. On a rocky outcrop next to a beach. Watching the stars and whatnot because F you, that's why. Just sitting there watching meteors every so often. Listening to the soft sound of waves. Suddenly hear a big splash. Might be a whale. Side note, whales migrate through this area and giant squid have been spotted. Well, I found a bit of a giant squid carcass anyway. Scanning the water to see if I can catch a whale breaching, suddenly a fish jumps out of the water, followed by a bunch of its school. Must be dolphins rounding them up. They come into the shallow water. I'm waiting for the dolphin, shark, or whatever to show itself. All of a sudden, something big breaches further out to the sea. The water displacement tells me it's very big. I've seen humpback whales and orcas breach, but this was bigger. Whatever it was breaks the surface as it heads out to sea. This thing looks as long as a football oval. It's big, dark, and shiny, and it looks like it's slithering through the water. As it gets further out, it dives back under. Its back end looks like an eel's tail. I sat there waiting for it to come back. Thing is, next few days they had a dangerous swell warning. They were telling people not to go out in any boats due to the chance of capsizing. My face when, those few days, it was basically flat calm. 19. Crazy into cave diving. Been doing it with my family since I was 15. Buy a $500 truck from Craigslist. Make it run well with another $200. Take my thousands of dollars worth of diving shit down to Florida to dive in some caves some guy on a forum found in 2006. When I get to the cave, I get spooky vibes. No parking. Looks like it's in a permanent state of twilight because of so many trees. Whatever. Put on wetsuit, oxygen tank, rebreather, knife, 1,000-foot waterproof string so I don't get lost, massive wheel I drag behind me. Bring snacks, phone, watch and wallet in waterproof bags. What? Car has no locks and there's no telling where I resurface. It's stupid diving alone, but whatever. Dive. Remember instructions from forum and go straight under east side ledge into cave. Cave is a straightaway that goes down at a 45-degree angle. Hard to get lost. Cave levels out. Swimming through, and before I know it, there's lots of turns I've gone through. Pressure increasing for some reason. Wow, it's almost like you're going down. String is still trailing behind me. Descent.jpg. Pressure still increasing. WTF? How deep am I? No instruments to tell depth. Decide to turn around. Follow string. Something's wrong. String no longer luminescent green. Now purple. Maybe water shifting colors? Whatever. String leads to a cavern I've never been in. Panic. Swim around helplessly until I see natural light in the distance. Further on in another cave. Abandon string and swim towards light. Get to light. Exit out of the cave somewhere in an absolutely fucking massive lake. Where I entered was practically a pond. Concerned, but I have everything I brought and need, so it's okay. Surface. 500 feet from the nearest shore. Swim to shore. Lake is seemingly in the middle of a forest. Take off flippers and walk in wet shoes that I keep in case I surface in a non-for-barefoot area. Forest is kinda chilly, near 40 degrees. Walk for hours, eat all the snacks. Stumble upon a road, hitch a ride to nearest store. Guy kinda weirded out by a guy in a wetsuit in this weather in his car, but whatever. While in the car, I ask where I am. You gotta be kidding me, right? No, where are we? Near Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Wyoming. Fucking Wyoming? Thank him and get to the general store. Buy coat and other clothes with money saved on Ship Mobile. Notice a lot of Yellowstone souvenir stuff. Must have surfaced in one of the Yellowstone lakes. Ask for places near here to stay for a night. He gets his son to drive me to an inn. Stay until I manage to get back to Tennessee where I live. Never went back for my truck. Never went cave diving again. What? What was that? 2008. Dropped out of uni. Conscription started. Decided to go. Nothing better to do. Assigned to a combat diving squad. In the middle of winter, some of us got relocated to a northern region near the Norway border. There's no sun. Always dark. Almost always snowing and the wind is very strong. One of these days we were supposed to do underwater training. Went to a training polygon. Boat takes us to the open sea as usual. Everything is dark as always. Water is even darker. Starting to submerge in pairs. We do this using a thick rope, which we're supposed to hold tight with hands and leg lock. 5, 10, 15 meters. Commander says to go deeper. Not a problem. We went for 45 meters before. 20, 25, 30 meters. Feeling something strange. 35, 40, 45 meters. Absolute darkness. Hands becoming weak. Legs don't hold me anymore. On the verge of letting go of the rope, which means I'll fall into the sea and be turned into a pulp because of the pressure. Almost losing consciousness. Hallucinating or not, but suddenly a face appears in front of my mask. It's not a human face, it had tendrils. It embraces me with its hands, and I feel saved. Hearing Commander shouting on the radio, orders to return to the surface. Hallucination is most likely, but it wasn't my first time submerging, and something like this never happened before. Hard to forget. Alright, that's some deep sea stories for you guys. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you soon. Bye.